Hi everyone, welcome back to Pages of the Globe, and today I'm going to be reading to you a short story called In a Grove by Ryūnosuke Akutagawa. Now, In a Grove is somewhat of a modernist short story, and the author is also known as the father of Japanese short stories. So In a Grove was probably one of Akutagawa's most notable works, alongside with Rashomon. Now, basically, what happens in this short story is that there's a samurai who's been murdered, and his corpse has been found in a bamboo forest in Japan. So, in order to solve the case, the police basically tries to get testimonies from multiple people who either saw exactly what happened or people who found the body. So everyone, as you read the testimonies, you realize that everyone has a different perspective of exactly what happened, and each character has a different story. And so one of the main things that Akutagawa tries to show us is that it's in human nature to lie, and it's impossible to really know what the truth is unless you were actually there. Because everyone in this story tries to make themselves look better, or they try to show themselves in a light where their actions are understood. In this story, you will notice how almost everyone says something that someone else will contradict. And in the end, really, the one thing that everyone can agree to is the fact that someone has been murdered and that they were murdered in a grove. So before I get too much into the story, I'm going to tell you a couple facts about the author. Now, Ryūnosuke Akutagawa was born on March 1st, 1892, and died on July 24th, 1927. He was a Japanese writer known especially for his stories based on events in the Japanese past. He began his literary career while attending the University of Tokyo, where he studied English literature for 3 years. In 1915, he published his first short story, Rashomon. It was about the thoughts of a man on the edge of a life of crime and the incident that pushes him over the brink. He ranged wide in his choice of material, drawing from inspiration such as disparate sources as China, Japan's 16th century Christian community in Nagasaki, and European contacts with the 19th century Japan. Akutagawa is probably one of the most widely translated of all Japanese writers, and a number of his short stories have been made into films. One of them being Rashomon, which combined with In a Grove was the starting point for Japanese director Kurosawa Akira's classic film Rashomon in 1950. In a Grove itself was published in 1922. Now, before we start, I would like to apologize in advance for any names or places that I mispronounce, because since this is a Japanese story, I am not familiar with most of the Japanese words used. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which story you would like to hear next. I want to hear from the listeners. Now, without further ado, let's start the story. Number 1. The testimony of a woodcutter questioned by a high police commissioner. Yes, sir. Certainly, it was I who found the body. This morning, as usual, I went to cut my daily quota of cedars when I found the body in a grove in a hollow in the mountains. The exact location? About 150 meters off the Yamashina Stage Road. It's an out-of-the-way grove of bamboo and cedars. The body was lying flat, on its back, dressed in a bluish silk kimono and a wrinkled headdress of the Kyoto style. A single sword stroke had pierced the breast. The fallen bamboo blades around it were stained with bloody blossoms. No, the blood was no longer running. The wound was dried up, I believe. Also, a gadfly was stuck there, fast, hardly noticing my footsteps. You asked me if I saw a sword or any such thing? No, nothing, sir. I found only a rope at the root of a cedar nearby. And, well, in addition to a rope, I found a comb. That was all. Apparently, he must have made a battle of it before he was murdered, because the grass and fallen bamboo blades had been trampled down all around. A horse was nearby? No, sir. It's hard enough for a man to enter, let alone a horse. Number 2. The testimony of a traveling Buddhist priest, questioned by a high police commissioner. The time? Certainly, it was about noon yesterday, sir. The unfortunate man was on the road from Sekiyama to Yamashina. He was walking towards Sekiyama with a woman accompanying him on horseback, who I have since learned was his wife. A scarf hanging from her head hid her face from view. All I saw was the color of her clothes, a lilac-colored suit. Her horse was a sorrel with a fine mane. The lady's height? Oh, about 4 feet 5 inches. Since I am a Buddhist priest, I took little notice about her details. While the man was armed with a sword as well as a bow and arrows. And I remember he carried some 20-odd arrows in his quiver. Little did I expect that he would ever meet such a fate. Truly, human life is as evanescent as the morning dew or a flash of lightning. My words are inadequate to express sympathy for him. Number 3. The testimony of a policeman, questioned by High Police Commissioner. That man I arrested, he's a notorious brigand called Tajamaru. When I arrested him, he had fallen off his horse. He was groaning at the bridge of Wataguchi. The time? It was in the early hours of last night. For the record, I might say that the other day I tried to arrest him, but unfortunately he escaped. He was wearing a dark blue silk kimono and a large plain sword. And, as you see, he got a bow and arrows somewhere. You say this bow and these arrows look like the ones owned by the dead man? Then Tajamaru must be the murderer. The bow wound with leather strips, the black lacquered quiver, the 17 arrows with hawk feathers. These were all in his possession, I believe. Yes, sir, the horse is, as you say, a sorrel with fine mane. A little beyond the stone bridge, I found the horse grazing by the roadside, with his long rein dangling. Surely there is some providence in his having been thrown by the horse. Of all the robbers prowling around Kyoto, this Tajamaru has given the most grief to the women in town. Last autumn, a wife who came to the mountain back from the Pandora of the Torib temple, presumably to pay a visit, was murdered along with a girl. It has been suspected that it was his doing. If this criminal murdered the man, you could not tell what he may have done with the man's wife. May it please your honor to look into this problem as well. Number 4. The testimony of an old woman questioned by a high police commissioner. Yes, sir, that corpse is the man who married my daughter. He does not come from Kyoto. He was a samurai in the town of Koku in the province of Wakasa. His name was Takahiko, and his age was 26. He was of a gentle disposition, so I am sure he did nothing to provoke the anger of others. My daughter, her name is Masago, and her age is 19. She is a spirited, fun-loving girl, but I am sure she has never known any man except Takahiko. She has a small, oval, dark-complected face with a mole at the corner of her left eye. Yesterday, Takahiko left for Wakasa with my daughter. What bad luck is it that things should have to come to such a sad end? What has become of my daughter? I am resigned to giving up my son-in-law at last, but the fate of my daughter worries me sick. For heaven's sake, leave no stone unturned to find her. I hate that robber, Tajamaru, or whatever his name is. Not only my son-in-law, but my daughter." Her later words were drowned in tears. Number 5. The Confession of a Woman Who Has Come to the Shimutsu Temple. That man in the blue silk kimono, after forcing me to yield to him, laughed mockingly as he looked at my bound husband. How horrified my husband must have been! But no matter how hard he struggled in agony, the rope cut into him the more tightly. In spite of myself, I ran stumblingly toward his side. Or rather, I tried to run toward him, but the man instantly knocked me down. Just at that moment, I saw an indescribable light in my husband's eyes. Something beyond expression. His eyes make me shudder even now. That instantaneous look of my husband, couldn't speak a word, told me all his heart. That flash in his eyes was neither anger nor sorrow, only a cold light, a look of loathing. More struck by the look in his eyes than the blow of the street, I called out in spite of myself and fell unconscious. In the course of time I came to, and found that the man in the blue silk was gone. I saw only my husband still bound to the root of cedar. I raised myself from the bamboo blades with difficulty, looked into his face, but the expression in his eyes was just the same as before. Beneath the cold contempt in his eyes, there was hatred, shame, grief, anger. I don't know how to express my heart at that time. Reeling to my feet, I went up to my husband. "Takejiro," I said, "since things have come to this pass, I cannot live with you. I am determined to die, but you must die too. You saw my shame. I cannot leave you alive as you are." This was all I could say. Still he went on gazing at me with loathing and contempt. My heart breaking, I looked for his sword. It must have been taken by the robber. Neither his sword nor his bow and arrows were seen in the grove. But fortunately, my small sword was lying at my feet. Raising it overhead, once more I said, "Now give me your life. I'll follow you right away." When he heard these words, he moved his lips with difficulty. Since his mouth was stuffed with leaves, of course, his voice could not be heard, but at a glance I understood his words. Despising me, his look said only, "Kill me." Neither conscious nor unconscious, I stabbed the sword through the lilac-colored kimono into his breast. Again, at this time, I must have fainted. By the time I managed to look up, he had already breathed his last, still in bonds. A streak of sinking sunlight streamed through the clump of cedars and bamboos and shone on his pale face. Gulping down my sobs, I untied the rope from his dead body. And what has become of me since I have no more strength to tell you? Anyway, I didn't have the strength to die. I stabbed my own throat with the small sword. I threw myself in a pond at the foot of the mountain, and I tried to kill myself in many ways. Unable to end my life, I am still living in dishonor. A lonely exile. Worthless as I am, I must have been forsaken, even by the most merciful Kwannon. I killed my own husband. I was violated by the robber. Whatever can I do? Whatever can I gradually violent sobbing. Number 6. The story of a murdered man as told through a medium. After violating my wife, the robber sitting there began to speak comforting words to her. Of course, I can't speak. My whole body was tied fast to the root of a cedar. But meanwhile, I winked at her many times, as much as to say, "Don't believe the robber." I wanted to convey such meaning to her, but my wife, sitting dejectedly on the bamboo leaves, was looking hard at her lap. To all the appearances, she was listening to the words. I was agonized by jealousy. In the meantime, the robber went on with his clever talk from one subject to another. The robber finally made his bold, brazen proposal. Once your virtue is stained, you won't get along well with your husband, so won't you be my wife instead? It is my love for you that made me be violent toward you. While the criminal talked, my wife raised her head as if in a trance. She had never looked so beautiful at that moment. What did my beautiful wife say in answer to him while I was sitting bound there? I am lost in space, but I have never thought of her answer without burning with anger and jealousy. Truly, she said, then take me away with you wherever you go. This is not the whole of her sin. If that were all, I would not be tormented so much in the dark. When she was going out of the grove, as if suddenly in a dream, her hand in the robber's, she suddenly turned pale and pointed at me, tied to the root of the cedar, and said, Kill him! I cannot marry you as long as he lives. Kill him! She cried many times, as if she had gone crazy. Even now these words threatened to blow me headlong into the bottomless abyss of darkness. Has such a hateful thing come out of a human mouth ever before? Has such cursed words ever struck a human ear, even once? Even once such a sudden cry of scorn. At these words the robber turned himself pale. Kill him, she cried, clinging to his arms. Looking hard at her, he answered neither yes or no, but hardly had I thought about his answer before she had been knocked down in the bamboo leaves. Again a cry of scorn. Quietly folding his arms, he looked at me and said, What will you do with her? Kill her or save her? You only have to nod. Kill her? For these words alone, I would like to pardon his crime. While I hesitated, she shrieked and ran into the depths of the grove. The robber instantly snatched at her, but even he failed to grasp her sleeve. After she ran away, he took my sword and my bow and arrows. With a single stroke, he cut one of my bonds. I remember his mumbling, My fate is next. Then he disappeared from the grove. All was silent after that. No, I heard someone crying. Untying the rest of my bonds, I listened carefully, and I noticed that it was my own crying. Long silence. I raised my exhausted body from the root of the cedar. In front of me there was shining the small sword which my wife had dropped. I took it up and stabbed it into my breast. A bloody lump rose to my mouth, but I didn't feel any pain. My breast grew cold. Everything was as silent as the dead in their graves. What profound silence! Not a single bird note was heard in the sky over this grave in the hollow of the mountains. Only a lonely light lingered now on the cedars and mountains. By and by, the light gradually grew fainter, till the cedars and bamboo were lost to view. Lying there, I was enveloped in deep silence. Then someone crept up to me. I tried to see who it was, but darkness had already been gathering round me. Someone drew the sword softly out of my breast in its invisible hand. At that same time, once more, blood flowed into my mouth, and once for all I sank into the darkness of space. 7. Tajumaru's confession. I killed him, but not her. Where's she gone? I can't tell. Oh, wait a minute. No torture can make me confess what I don't know. Now things have come to such a head, I won't keep anything from you. Yesterday, a little past noon, I met that couple. Just then, a puff of wind blew and raised her hanging scarf, so that I caught a glimpse of her face. Instantly, it was again covered from my view. That may have been one reason. She looked like a bodhisattva. At that moment, I made up my mind to capture her, even if I had to kill her man. Why? To me, killing isn't a matter of such great consequence as you might think. When a woman is captured, her man has to be killed anyway. In killing, I use the sword I wear at my side. Am I the only one who kills people? You don't even use your words. You kill people with your power, with your money. Sometimes you kill people on the pretext of working for the good. It's true they don't bleed. They're in the best of health, but all the same you've killed them. It's harder to say who's a greater sinner, you or me. An ironic smile. But it would be good if I could capture a woman without killing her man. So I made up my mind to capture her and do my best not to kill him. But it's out of question on the Yamashina Stage Road. So I managed to lure the couple into the mountains. It was quite easy. I began their traveling companion and I told them there was an old mound in the mountain over there, that I had dug it open and found many mirrors and swords. I went on to tell them I had buried things in the grove behind the mountain, and that I'd like to sell them at a low price to anyone who would care to have them. Then, you see, isn't greed a terrible thing? He was beginning to be moved by my talk before he knew it. In less than half an hour, they were driving their horse toward the mountain with me. When he came in front of the grove, I told him that the treasures were buried in it, and I asked to come and see. The man had no objection. He was blinded by greed. The woman said she would wait on horseback. It was natural for her to say so, at the sight of a thick grove. To tell you the truth, my plan worked just as I had wished. So I went into the grove with him, leaving her behind alone. The grove is only bamboo for some distance. About 50 yards ahead there is a rather open clump of cedars. It was a convenient spot for my purpose. Pushing my way through the grove, I told him a plausible lie, that the treasures were buried under the cedars. When I told him this, he pushed his laborious way toward the slender cedar visible through the grove. After a while, the bamboo thinned out, and we came to where a number of cedars grew in a row. As soon as we got there, I seized him from behind. Because he was a trained sword-bearing warrior, he was quite strong, but he was taken by surprise, so there was no help for him. I soon tied him up to the root of the cedar. Where did I get a rope? Thank heaven, being a robber, I had a rope with me, since I might have to scale a wall at any moment. Of course, it was easy to stop him from calling out by gagging his mouth with fallen bamboo leaves. When I disposed of him, I went to his woman and asked her to come see him, because he seemed to have suddenly taken sick. It's needless to say that the plan also worked well. The woman, her sedge hat off, came into the depths of the grove, where I led her by the hand. The instant she caught sight of her husband, she drew a small sword. I've never seen a woman with such violent temper. If I had been off guard, I'd have gotten a thrust in my side. I dodged, but she kept on slashing me. She might have wounded me deeply or killed me, but I'm Tajamaru. I managed to strike down her small sword without drawing my own. The most spirited woman is defenseless without a weapon. At least I could satisfy my desire for her without taking her husband's life. Yes, without taking his life. I had no wish to kill him. I was about to run away from the grove, leaving the woman behind in tears, when she frantically clung to my arm. In broken fragments of words, she asked that either her husband or I die. She said it was more trying than death to have her shame known to two men. She gasped out that she wanted to be the wife of whichever survived. Then a furious desire to kill him seized me. Gloomy excitement. Telling you in a way, no doubt I seemed crueler man than you, but that's because you didn't see her face, especially her burning eyes at that moment. As I saw her eye to eye, I wanted to make her my wife. Even if I were to be struck by lightning, I wanted to make her my wife. This single desire filled my mind. It was not only lust, as you might think. At that time, I'd have no other desire than lust. I'd surely not minded knocking her down and running away. Then I wouldn't have stained my sword with his blood. But the moment I gazed at her face in the dark grove, I decided not to leave him there without killing him. But I didn't like to resort to such unfair means to kill him. I untied him and told him to cross swords with me. The rope that was found at the root of the cedar is the rope I dropped at the time. Furious with anger, he drew his thick sword, and quick as thought he sprang at me ferociously without speaking a word. I needn't tell you how our fight turned out. The 23rd stroke, please remember this, I'm impressed with this fact still. Nobody under the sun has ever clashed swords with me 20 strokes. A cheerful smile. When he fell, I turned toward her, lowering my blood-stained sword. But to my great astonishment, she was gone. I wondered to where she had run away. I looked for her in the clump of cedars. I listened, but heard only a groaning sound from the throat of a dying man. As soon as we started to cross swords, she may have run away through the grove to call for help. When I thought of that, I decided it was a matter of life and death to me. So robbing him of his sword and bow and arrows, I ran out to the mountain road. There I found our horse still grazing quietly. It would be a mere waste of words to tell you the later details, but before I entered town I had already parted with the sword. That is my confession. I know that my head will be hung in chains anyway, so put me down for the maximum penalty. A defiant attitude. The end.